Yo sup, this is NY3. Now there's one more group of cards that I wanted to talk about that came out in Shining Victories, and they are the Amorphrages. So the Amorphrages are a floodgate, slowed playstyle type deck where you sit behind these 3 continuous and field cards to generate a +1 or +2 over each turn. So that finally after 10 turns you'll have enough advantage to overwhelm your opponent who shouldn't be doing that much anyways, since you should have floodgated them out. But that's not what this channel's about, it's not what I'm about. I'm all about the fast-paced combo piece. So we're just gonna get this shit out of here and focus on the main man, which is Gaydirk. I've mentioned before that all dragons and wing beasts that get released are all going to be potential Dragoonity support, and Amorphrages are no exception. For Dragoonities, Amorphrages are very useful searchable floodgates. Now Gaydirk only searches up to level 4, which means Sloth and Goliath, which are the Mistake and the Macrocosmos, cannot be searched. However, we still have some other pretty good options for Gaydirk to grab. We've got Anti-Burn, we have Anti-Tribute, we have Anti-Traps, we have anti-monster effects, and we also have anti-Yu-Gi-Oh, which is the anti-Chainlink guy. But the best one of all is obviously going to be our anti-spell, who is Leechery. The other 5 are potential side deck options. The anti-tribute is very useful if you want your field to be immune to kaijus. However, I would not side it in against monarchs, since anti-spell is much stronger against monarchs than anti-tribute. Now the anti-trap guy and the anti-burn guy, obviously very good side deck options for some of the more rogue card of the mice decks out there. The anti-monster effect and the anti-chainlink guy are pretty counterproductive to what we are going to be doing, so I don't think I would ever side deck those. But today I'm going to show one of the most basic Amorphrage Dragoonity combo that you can do. So this combo is a 5-card combo. You can bump it down to 4 cards if one of the cards you open was instant fusion. And you can bump it down even 1 card further, down to a 3-card combo if you can get Phalanx into the graveyard without minusing. So that would be via a method such as a card of consonance discarding Dragoonity Phalanx and drawing into the combo pieces that you need. But for this example, I'm just going to be using the full 5 cards. We didn't open Instant Fusion, nor did we open Consonance Phalanx. So it's going to be a pretty resource intensive combo, although it would be very likely an auto win if you do pull it off. Now, the combo requires 3 very specific pieces and 2 fairly non-specific pieces. These 2 cards could be any wing beast or dragon, unless you open something ridiculous like triple ducks. So let's just get started with the combo, and I'll show you what a Dragoonity Amorphage hybrid can bring to the table. So first things first, we're going to put our Phalanx into the graveyard. Normal summon the ducks, equip Phalanx. Phalanx summons itself. Send the Phalanx to the grave, special mythal 10. Phalanx equips and special summons itself again. We're going to synchro 2, 4, 4, 6. So this is our Gaydirk. Gaydirk is going to add to our hand the Zephyros and discard it to the graveyard. We're going to overlay our 6s into a tomb. The tomb attaches Gaydirk. This summons Red Eyes at 0/0 from the deck. We're going to summon the Gaydirk with Red Eyes. Gaydirk will add Garuda the Wind Spirit and discard the Baby Rock. Baby Rock summons itself upon being discarded. And then we're going to synchro Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. Bounce the Red Eyes, summon Zephyros, take 400, banish the tomb, summoning the Red Eyes. Red Eyes can use its effect again, so we're gonna bring back Gaydirk. Next, we're gonna banish a wind, so Baby Rock for example, to special summon Garuda. We're going to overlay for Queen Dragoon Jin, detach to summon our, in this case, the Mistletoe from the grave. We haven't used Gaydarg's effect yet this time round, so we're gonna use Gaydarg to add Leechery and discard our last Winged Beast from our hand. Next up, overlay our 2 6s for our second Atom. Going to detach. And here, you can summon any Amorphage you want. I'm just gonna go ahead with Goliath, and then activate our Leechery and our Pendulum Scale, which is the combo. Leechery is going to be stopping all spells, which is why we made Crystal Wing instead of Stardust or anything like that, since we are no longer afraid of mass removal like Raigeki or Dark Hole, because Leechery has us covered. Now depending on what deck your opponent's playing, if their deck is very heavily extra deck reliant, you want to summon one of the big ones, so Goliath or Sloth, which is going to lock out their extra decks as well. If you're not playing a very extra deck intensive deck, for example Domain Monarchs, you would probably want to summon a smaller one instead, because these bigger ones also lock yourself out from using the extra deck. Of course, on your turn, you could always use Leechery to tribute your Goliath to open up your extra deck usage again, providing that you actually have the space to do so. But that would also switch off Leechery, perhaps opening yourself up to the Monarch Stormforth or something along those lines. Now, the Queen Dragoon Jin is going to be protecting all of your dragons from battle, mainly the Goliath, which is at 0/0. Now, if Goliath gets killed, Leechery will switch itself off, and they'll be able to activate all the spell cards that they want. But most relevant decks right now can't put more than one monster on board without the use of spells. So, for example, in the Cosmo case, they have their one normal summon, and then they have their island and E-Tele plays. As for Pendulum decks, they have to set up their scales before summoning a bunch of monsters. They could also instant fusion, but that is also a spell. So Leechery is going to be stopping all of those decks. Now this combo is not too good against decks that can summon a bunch of monsters using only monster effects. Crystal Wing can only negate one, and that's usually going to be their normal summon play, and then once you negate that, their turn should just end. But if we're talking about something like going up against Mermails, they are only restricted by what they have in their hands. So if they pitch infantries for the cost of Megalo, or they pitch infantries for the cost of Neptibus, and then summon Megalos and Abyss Tierces, you can only stop one effect, so they could potentially out this board. But most meta decks right now can't. Monarchs, especially when you lock out their spells, such as Stormforth, it greatly decreases any chance they have at breaking huge boards like this. Another problem we could encounter is if they run traps. So if it's a very trap heavy deck, obviously we would want our Amorphage Greed instead of the Leechery. Now here I picked Goliath over Sloth. Although Sloth at first sight being level 6 dragon might seem a bit better, but no matter how Sloth is summoned, you can't use it for a Synchro or Exceed play, so you can't overlay it for a Tome, nor can you Synchro it for an Ignister. So there's not much point running Sloth, so I just went with Goliath since it has slightly more attack. So when we do alternate versions of this combo, where we would dump Goliath to the graveyard with Dragon's Ravine effect, for example, and bring it back with Red Ice Darkness Metal Dragon, it's going to be just a bigger body than Sloth. And in those sort of combos, we don't even need the Queen Dragoon Jin to protect it, since it's already 2750 itself. Yeah, most decks are going to have a very hard time getting over this. Apart from Kaijus or some very specific counters such as Typhoon, they're not really going to be getting over this board, even if you do this combo and let them draw 25 of Maxi. Now if they do set 4, of course they could be potentially dangerous things, for example drowning Mirror Forces or storming Mirror Forces or something like that. So if they do set all those traps, on our next turn we can play around it. Leetry has to tribute 1 for cost to maintain its scale, which gives us the room to play around with. Let's just say we top deck the 3rd Dux for turn, for example, or any Dragon or Wing Beast. We can just go ahead and use Red Eyes, bring back Gaydarg. Gaydarg can add our Amorphage Greed and discard the Wing Beast that we top deck, and set the Greed in the opposite pendulum scale. Now this is going to be stopping both spells and traps, so you can switch all your guys to attack mode and attack for game without fear of those blowout mirror forces. Now of course, you aren't just limited to the Amorphages. As I said, Gaydarg can make use of any Dragon or Wing Beasts, so it could even be these guys. Very good combo pieces. Luster and Master, very good combo pieces. Vector and Lecter are floodgates on their own. Unlike the Amorphages, you don't need an Amorphage monster as a monster on the field to use them. And Lecter locking out pendulum effects. Vector locking out pendulum effects. Lecter locking out pendulum monster effects can also be very devastating, and are even harder to deal with now than they are before due to the banning of Wavering Eyes. But this guy here, Leetry, is just by far the best one, since kind of like the Secret Village locks from before, Leetry protects itself from common floodgate removal such as MST and whatnot, so you don't need to protect it by going out of the way and making something not as good, for example a Stardust, instead of the Crystal Wing. But that has been the Amorphragunity Combo, and I guess I'll see you guys in a couple of months when the Dark Illusions come out.